Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Really hope you guys have been enjoying the Twitter series so far. In today's video, which is episode 6 of the series, I'm going to try to teach you guys an algorithm to implement kind of dynamic sizing for our user cells. And this is going to change the height based on the text contents inside of each one of these rows. All right, so let me show you guys what that looks like right here. Inside of this simulator, we have our application so far, which contains this big gap down here. And there's also another gap for the array Wonderlic cell. And if you implement dynamic sizing, it'll make your application look a lot cleaner in terms of its layout. And for each one of these cells, you'll notice how the height of the cell is kind of based on how tall the text inside of it is. So you see there's 4 lines here and 3 lines of text here. And the same technique is used to kind of achieve dynamic sizing for all of these cells right here. You notice how this is a little bit shorter than this, and it's all just different sizing based on the contents inside of the cell. All right, so pretty good stuff. And let me kind of shrink this down to the corner here. And I want to kind of mention one thing first. So this algorithm is really useful, but one thing about it is that it can be a little tricky because it involves trial and error and a couple of guesses to get the calculations correct. Okay, so going back to Xcode, what I have open is home data source controller. And one thing you'll notice is that our controller file is really clean because we've been using LBTA components, and this framework keeps our controller files just really clean and free of all of that unnecessary code. All it's doing for us is the layout. And the first thing I want to change is the size for item at IndexPath to a height of 200 for each one of these cells. So I'm just doing this to kind of get the ball rolling for today's video here. I'm going to run the app, and instead of just 150 for the height, now get 200. So the gap right here and the gap right here is a lot larger. And basically we're going to now kind of give it an estimated height instead of just 200. All right, before I can kind of do the estimation, I want to first get reference to the user inside of the cell. Right, so what I can do is self data source right here, the item right here with index path of this guy, which is that right here. So this line actually gives us that user. So let me just say let user equals that. And the reason why it is the user is because we've set home data source to be self data source, and home data source, this item call on it, gives us a user from this call right here. So that's how we know it's an actual user object. So I'm going to cast this down as a user and say user.biotext. I get an optional string, and let me just print this out right here. And printing that out, you guys can probably guess what you'll see in the console down below. So let's wait for the app to load right here, and you get the BioText up here for the first cell, and then the second cell, you get the BioText like that. So good stuff. Instead of messing with this optional string guy, I'm going to go ahead and use an if let unwrapping of the user. And then now I can access user.biotext like that without the worry of accessing an optional string. Okay, so BioText is there. And now I'm kind of ready to provide an estimation for the height of our cell. So let's get, let's see, is there an apostrophe here? Yes, there is. Let's get an estimation of the height of our cell based on BioText, or actually user.biotext. All right, so how do we do this, and why are we choosing BioText instead of name and user name? And the reason is because BioText is the bit of text that actually adjusts the height of our cells. So you notice how this has 4 lines and this has 3 lines. So we're going to use BioText to dynamically calculate everything here. So how do I do this? Well, I'm going to type it out and explain a little bit later. So let estimator frame be of type and a string with a constructor of string, and this string will be user BioText. And I'm going to call this monster caller here called bounding erect. And if we read the documentation, it says calculates and returns the boundary erect for the receiver drawn using the given options and display characteristics. In other words, it just gives us an estimated size for the text. Okay, so given this call, we have 4 parameters that we need to fill out. And let's start off easily with the size parameter. So what is the size parameter? Well, one way to explain what the size needs to be is I'm going to modify BioText view right here instead of user cell with a background color of .red. So it says clear, and then I'm going to change it to red right after. Okay, so what is this complaining about here? All right, so all of these guys right here, I'm going to comment out and then run the application now. And we'll get rid of that warning in just a little bit. So running the app, we get launched here, and you see this entire text view is now red. And the size that we're going to calculate now is basically this size of the red text view. So size is just a size, let size equals CG size like that. And we need a width and a height value. So let approximate width of BioTextView. I'm going to use that here. And so what is the approximate width of this red block? Well, I can calculate it based on how wide the screen is. So the screen is actually with a width of view frame width. I'm going to subtract the 12 padding, which is here. And then this user cell is 50 right there. So the profile image view is 50. So minus 12 minus 50. And then there's a little bit of a gap between this and the red block. So I'm going to give it a value of 8. And now I can use a height. Let's see, this is the approximate width right here, that calculation. And the height needs to be some arbitrarily large value. So giving it 1,000 should work. Okay. If you don't remember where these values come from, you can always go back to user cell. And let's see, we have a left constant of 12 for the profile image view. That's where the 12 is coming from. And yeah, that's kind of how these values are attained. So now let's look at what to fill out here. Let's see, size is good. Now we want to use an options of uses line fragment origin. Okay, so it tells you kind of to use line fragment origin here in the documentation. And now moving on to attributes, what do we want here? So attributes, I'll say let attributes equal NS font, attribute name of UI font, and system font of size 15. So what the heck is this guy? So size 15 comes from user cell, and then going back up to BioTextView right here, I'm specifying a font of 15 system font, and that's what I need to use for attributes right here. So there, and context will just be nil. And okay, after that monstrous calculation is done, I'm going to return CG size of width of view frame width, and then a height of, let's see, estimated frame height. Can I get that? Okay, running this application now, we're going to get some kind of estimation for the size of our cell, and whether or not it's correct, we'll see right now. All right, so you see how the text or the user cell height is the same for both of these cells. And the reason is because this 8 right here is actually not enough. And I know this because I was doing this earlier. And TextView has some padding inside of the component itself. So we have to give it a little bit of extra spacing for the width. So that's how we get that to work. And here's how minus 12, minus 50, and minus 12 again gives us a varying height for both of these cells. So that's pretty good. And the last remaining thing to do now is we need to add back the height for each one of these components. So Ray Wenderlich here, and then the username right here. So Ray Wenderlich, let's see, going back to user cell. So the name label has a height of 20, and then the username label has another height of 20. So that's a total height of 40, right? And then we have the padding on top, which is basically this profile image view, top constant 12, because this is actually anchored to the top of the profile image view. So it's 12, 20, and 20, which gives us about 52. So if I go back down to this guy right here, so home data source controller, size for item at index path is estimated frame dot height plus 52. Let's see what that gives us inside of our cell now that we have an extra bit of height for each one of these rows. Okay, so pretty exciting stuff. And now you'll notice how more of the text is being fit into each one of these rows. And I can already tell you what the fix needs to be. Instead of 52, let me add a value of 66. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the UI text view just inherently needs more height whenever you provide an estimated calculation like that. So giving it a value of 66 now we have this right here, which kind of fits our BioTextView pretty perfectly, I would say. Okay, so with that calculation now done, let me go back to user cell and turn off this hideous red color and run the app one more time. Okay, so everything is pretty good, but I can tell you that it's actually not perfect. Okay, so that looks like that. Let me just blow this up a little bit, give it a better view here. So it looks like this, nice spacing there and there. All right, so what do I want to show you guys right now? So you can see that there's actually a gap right above this Ray Wenderlich name right there. And the gap is actually really large compared to what the Twitter design looks like. And so where is this gap coming from? Some of you guys are probably asking. And so the gap is actually coming from something that belongs to UICollectionView layout. I want to show you guys what that gap looks like right now. Okay, so going back to user cell, I'm going to say self.background color equals .red. Well, actually, let's use the value of .blue. So basically, I'm going to color all of these cells to have a blue background color. And running that, you'll see a gap. So you see this gap right here. That gap is something that you can actually modify based on the collection view. So one way of doing it is to go down here in Home Data Source Controller. Let me get an extra space right here for consistency. I'm going to say minimum line spacing right there. So you get minimum line spacing for a section. I'm going to say return a value of 0. So returning 0 will actually collapse that entire gap back down to 0. There's another way of doing this, but I find this to be a little cleaner and more self-explanatory, I guess. So we get that, and then that little gap right there is actually the separator line view. All right, so good stuff. Let me now go back to user cell and turn off the blue color to see what all of the changes look like and whether or not the design actually matches our Twitter layout. So running the app now, we get this and this, so everything looks pretty darn good. So one other thing I want to test out here is what happens when I use some other bit of BioText that is really long. So I always do this when I provide a estimated calculation for my cells. And while I'm here, I'm going to actually do some self-promotion here. There's a Kindle Course user, or create this other user, right? So user is right here, and we'll use this name constructor. So let's call this Kindle Course, and let's see, at Kindle Course, I suppose. And the BioText will be something, and I'll just use my profile image for here. Profile image like that. And the BioText, I want it to be something very long, just to make sure it works out correctly. The BioText will be this recently released, released course on https://videos. Let's build that app.com/basic training provides some excellent guidance on how to use UI table view and UI collection view. So let's run that right there. First, I need to add this Kindle Course user. Let me just paste that in there and voila. So I'm gonna run this application now. And so recently I released this Kindle course that does some basic training for you guys. If you wanna go visit it, you guys can feel free to do so. All right, so that's what that looks like. You notice how we have 4 lines down here, right? So I don't think it's actually enough to test out what the calculation does or does not do. So I'm gonna add some extra text here. This course also teaches some basics on the Swift language. For example, let's see, if statements and for loops. I guess I'll type it that way and get rid of that comment. This will be an excellent purchase for you. So I'm going to type all that out. And this bit of text is going to be really long right now, which means it'll give me a pretty good idea if the rendering is correct. So that's what that looks like. And it looks pretty good, right? There's no extra spacing down here and everything looks nice and clean. All right. So good stuff there. One other thing I want to show you guys is the rendering on an iPhone 7 Plus. And if we have extra time, we'll do the rendering for the iPhone 5 and the iPad to make sure everything is nice and clean. So I'm going to run this right now, and because I guess my MacBook is not the fastest, it's going to launch the application in just a bit right here. So similar up, and this is what we get right here. So one thing that's wrong with the calculation right now, and kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is that you kind of need to guess the height values a little bit. And see how apps, the word apps right here, is getting cut off, but everything else looks like it's working out. And I want to go back to home data source controller and provide another value right here. I'm going to subtract 2 from the approximate width of the BioTextView and see what that does. And perhaps I'll explain to you why I did that. Okay, so the app is now running, and -2 actually gives us the correct height for the apps right here. And the reason why you would -2 is because if the calculation is cutting off your text, you know that you gave it too much width. If you shrink the width, the height will be taller in the estimated calculation. So that's how it works. I'm pretty used to how it works. So you guys can do it a couple times and then kind of figure out what the necessary modifications need to be for your application. All right, so that looks good. If I really want to confirm everything, let me run it on an iPhone 5S now, which looks like this. So the thing with iPhone 5S is that the screen size is really narrow in terms of the width. So the calculation should be okay, which means that the height of each one of these cells are going to be really tall now. So running the app, hopefully it runs. There we go. And inside of the simulator, we get this, and then we get that right there. So everything is lined up nicely along the bottom edge of each one of these cells. So iPhone 5 works, and let's get to another layout that's really interesting, which is the iPad Air 2. Okay, so iPad Air 2 is going to launch inside of the simulator here. Now this iPad device is really wide and really tall. So based on the calculations that we have, I don't know if you guys have any confidence in the layout being correct for each one of our cells. So iPad is up, and each one of our cells looks like this. So we have one line for the top right here, and we have 2 lines for this, and then we have 3 or 4 lines for the Kindle Course cell. And everything looks pretty darn good. If I rotate this guy, it looks like that. Perhaps I'll teach you guys how to fix the layout when we rotate our device. But that's what we get if we want to achieve dynamic cell sizing. All right, so that's going to be it for today's video. Like I was mentioning earlier, the calculation is a bit tricky, so if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. All right, make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. In the next video, I'm gonna perhaps go into how to modify the navigation bar and the tab bars at the bottom to make it look a little bit more like the Twitter application. Remember, source code is always down below. Make sure to go download and play with the project to kind of see how everything works. All right, that's going to be it for me today. Keep on coding, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.